when we were putting together our program for this year, we all recognized that obviously the last couple of years have been pretty difficult for everyone, and that we've all had to try new things in order to keep in contact with our congregations, our choirs, our musicians, our adherents, as well as to try and keep everything going or figure out how to keep things going. And to make that just a little bit more complicated, we're always trying to figure out how to do all of those things within a budget. So Bruce is here to share his wisdom about live streaming effectively on a budget. Over to you, Bruce.
Thanks, Josh. Yes, it's good to see everybody here. I'm just going to go back in gallery view for a moment so I can see all your lovely faces. I'm surprised there's that many people came back for this session. You know, you start talking tech and lots of people just run screaming from the room. That's a fairly standard reaction. So thank you for coming and hanging in here with this session. I wanted to start with just a theological question for all of us to talk about together, and that is, quite simply, why are we live streaming? What purpose does it serve? I don't know if anyone has any thoughts they want to share. Like, if you asked me this question, I'll start a little bit. If you asked me this question pre-pandemic, I would have said, I don't think it's really necessary. But now that we're in the midst of COVID and, you know, the waves come and go, and we're needing to do hybrid worship and online worship and you name it, I've been sold on the effectiveness, the need for live streaming. But anybody else want to? There we go. There's a comment from Lynn. Yeah, not all people are ready to return. And that's definitely my community is like that. Definitely. Diana's got her hand up. Yes, Diana?
As you know, and Thunder Bay, we've been doing a live streaming hub. So there's 5 United Churches that have been, for the last 2 years, live streaming together. But before COVID, Trinity, who has the live streaming equipment, was inviting smaller communities out in the middle of nowhere around Northern Ontario to come and live stream with them. So they reached the smaller communities and gave them a minister if they didn't have them, or a music director. So the small communities still took part in the service like everybody did. And so it's been a great tool for that. And we are now trying to figure out how to live stream ourselves now that we have a real minister, or a new minister. Sorry, real minister. And because there are many people who don't want to come back because of COVID. But we're also reaching people, our church family, who have moved to England and Australia, and you know, we still want to reach them.
Thank you. And yes, there's lots of stuff coming in on the chat too. The same kinds of things people are talking about. Like here's from Louise in Summerside, PEI. The live stream, our congregation has expanded out across the country to include many former congregants who have moved away, and they are so thrilled to be able to participate with family and friends, even in a virtual way. Well, how true is that? How true is that? Like, that's my experience. And in our case, we, from the very beginning, as we started, we had to start with services from home because we couldn't even be in our space together. So my wife Cheryl and I sorted out how we could stream from the boat where we live. We live on a boat in the Fraser River Delta. So we had that all sorted out, but then the need was to expand back into the building. So how could we do this? And our techies, who would normally kind of put their heads around this kind of stuff, just did not have the brain power. They had COVID issues to deal with and health issues and all those kinds of things. So I said, well, you know, I have decades of experience with audio engineering and basic video production skills and so on. So I said, well, maybe I'll take it on. You know, I have reduced duties at the church because of COVID. There's not as much that I can do, so I can be a techie and help to make this happen. because we use Zoom here, and we're always hybrid. And Zoom is one of those video networking kinds of platforms. But it means that on the fly, like Carrie, our minister here, a couple of weeks back, she had a COVID exposure on the Saturday. So she presided from home over Zoom. We have the Zoom audio feed going in the sanctuary. We have up on screen the Zoom. What you're seeing right now would be up on screen in the sanctuary as well. So people pop in and out. Scripture readers say, yes, I can read, and they might read from home. They might read from in the building. We were at Christmas Eve. We made the decision with the rise of Omicron and so on to stop having congregants in the building. So once again, it was our leadership that was in the building, and everyone else joined us on Zoom in the cloud. Nowadays, as I guess beginning of Lent and on, we've been back inviting people into the building again, everybody masked. We're all masked all the time. Carrie, our minister, will take her mask off when she's preaching, a couple of things like that. But particularly for those of us who are singing, because we are encouraging singing, it's much safer to have mask on. So we've been doing that. So I'm sold on live streaming, because I think over the next year and more, we're going to continue to have people who are uncomfortable in coming back into our buildings. And this way, people can make that choice. They can make that choice to join us in person or join us online. So, some of the reasons, the old reasons pre-pandemic that people would have given us for live streaming were about evangelism, reaching out beyond your congregation. As a church musician, I've always felt that my mission was to my people here in the congregation. So helping to lift up the volunteer gifts, instrumentalists, singers, all of that kind of thing. But increasingly, I think it's an added benefit now that we can be evangelical in that kind of a way and share widely. And just as was already mentioned, we have former congregants who are joining us again now and are very delighted to be with us for worship. So that's a beautiful thing, I think. Our session today, I'm talking more signal flow and so on than I am giving you prescriptions for what to do, because you all have different equipment available to you. And I'm going to talk about some of the simple ways that we can take the equipment we currently have and make it useful and function in your space. I've got slides that I'll put up in a moment that I'll convert to a PDF form so you can take it away. Because I'm assuming that, I know during our chat time, just during the break, some people were saying nothing happens unless I'm the one that makes it happen technically. So if that's the case, then this workshop is for you. But even if that isn't the case, I'm going to start by talking as a musician about how we get our most effective sound from the sanctuary into the cloud. So those kinds of basic techniques and stuff you can take and you could go talk to your sound person or go talk to your church techie and say, if we put this kind of a microphone up in front of my choir, we would have a much more effective sound on our streaming platform. And so those kinds of inputs, or even if your techie is totally mystified about, I don't know how to do the streaming, by the time we're done this session, you'll be able to talk them through how to set themselves up for live stream. So that's what I have in mind. And because I know everybody has questions all the time, and I use Cheryl as my sounding board. My wife Cheryl's here in the booth with me. She's off camera, but she looks at the slide I prepared and she starts to glaze over. Then I know that the tech language is a little bit hard. So if I say something or there's something on screen that just doesn't make sense to you, jump in and ask, and I'll try and rephrase it, okay? Just so we're all clear on what is happening going forward. Okay, I'm just going to bring up my presentation now. Live streaming on a budget. I wouldn't have chosen this topic title, but I kind of like it now that we're into it. So live streaming on a budget. This will end up costing you a little bit of money to live stream. But I think that the gear that I'm suggesting that is probably essential amounts to maybe a $300 cost, in that ballpark, to be able to really effectively live stream fairly well using the gear that you already have in your building. So we start with, and I know this is the bugbear for many people, particularly in rural areas of the country. Ideally, you need a high-speed internet connection that is 25 megabits or faster. 25 megabits is sufficient for a steady 1080p stream, which is kind of, we've gone well beyond that. There's 4K streaming and so on, but 1080p will fill most people's screens effectively, and it's not too resource intensive in terms of the internet. So that kind of a connection will work well. Now, I know I have live stream concerts and so on over a cell phone with maybe a 3 megabit connection, and it works. What you will end up with is dropouts and so on, or kind of the degrading of the signal, and then it comes back. It'll still work, but it's not as steady. At 25 megabits, everything runs steadily. Then what you need is a device, 2 options, a device or a system to capture video and audio and send them to the cloud. So for those who are just completely tech challenged by all of this, you can do exactly what Jason did for our opening worship time this morning. I'm guessing, Jason, you're there, right? You were, that was your laptop, was it? You were streaming off of? I think he was streaming on Wi-Fi using his laptop, just the laptop itself. So the beauty of that kind of a thing is the same one device is transcoding the video and the audio at the same time. So they're in sync and they get delivered. The downside is you're limited by the little microphone that you have on that device. They're not designed to reproduce bass frequencies, and they don't catch the high frequencies. They're designed to reproduce the spoken word, the voice. So it comes out a little bit thin, but it works. So you can stream directly from a device, a single device like that, be it a smartphone or a tablet or something of that sort, something that has a Wi-Fi connection, internet connection itself built into the device. Computer can do the job, laptop, those kinds of things. If you want to have a better quality stream and one that gives you a lot more flexibility, then you're going to need a computer system for video and audio capture. So I'm going to give you a couple of video options. How could we capture video in the sanctuary? Well, one of the simplest ways is a webcam plugged right into your computer. A simple webcam, and the quality will vary. Webcams are not great in terms of how they reproduce color and so on, and they don't respond well to insufficient light in the space. They really don't. So you want to make sure you've got lots of light on in your sanctuary if you're going to use a webcam, as much as you can get going. Another option, and this will be far better, is if you can find an old camcorder or a camera that someone in the congregation might have that has an HDMI output. It'll be a little tiny micro HDMI jack that'll be on the device, because you need some way of getting digital signal out of the camera. And HDMI is a digital standard for transferring, so there's no loss of signal as you go. And then you need a video capture device, and I have a recommendation for a super cheap capture device that you connect your camera with the HDMI cable into the video capture device, and the capture device translates it to that HDMI signal to USB, which your computer can read. And then it gets recognized on the computer as a web device. So mine comes up here on the screen as USB video device or something like that, it says. So it's that simple, that simple. Once again, you could use a camera that's 10 years old. It could be, you could just put out a call in the congregation saying, does anybody have a camera they're not using anymore? Yeah. And you can check yourself if they have some facility, they could check and see, yes, it has HDMI out. But it's as simple as that. The age of the camera won't matter as much as whether it has that digital output, the HDMI output. Then you need a system for audio capture. So in this case, it's microphones with an audio mixer and an audio interface, and that same computer, the same one that's doing your video capture, should be doing your audio capture as well. So I know, feel free to jump in, right? Like I said, if there's none of this is very clear. I'm going on to what microphones are already in the building. You know, I've had the pleasure of being in congregations from coast to coast, hundreds of buildings, and I've had to work with all the sound systems everywhere I go. And I'm always amazed at the variety of equipment people already have. Maybe 20, 30 years in the past, somebody found a little bit of budget and said, I want to try and upgrade one of our microphones. So there's a microphone that gets used, or it doesn't really work as well as somebody thinks it should for the live worship application, and so it just gets put away. But we all have them. So I'm just going to teach you a little bit about microphones and what makes them different. So polar patterns, I know that's a weird kind of a term, but different microphones have different kinds of areas that they capture. So cardioid, which is the most common you'll find in church cupboards, they call it unidirectional. So mostly picks up sound from directly in front of the mic. So I'm just holding up. This is a cardioid patterned mic. Not that you can see the cardioid pattern, but it means that the field is right, mostly in front. If I was to use the microphone from the side, you'd only get about 50% of the sound coming into it and so on. It's designed to be used directly in front. And these mics are really good for close-up use, for a soloist, spoken word. They're good to, stick on an instrument at the last minute when you need to get some sound of an instrument. They're warm mics. They're meant to be used at a distance, kind of no more than 15 centimeters away from your sound source. So if you've got a cardioid mic and you're using it to mic a room, it might work, but you'll have to turn it up so high, and it'll introduce a lot of noise into the signal, and it'll be super thin sound. They're meant for this kind of really close work. So Sunday mornings, I've got my lips pretty much against that microphone when I'm using it, just to maximize the amount of frequency that's going into the microphone. So that's cardioid. That's the main kind of microphone. The other one that you'll find in church cupboards and so on is omnidirectional. Omnidirectional. I'm just going to use the same mic even though it's a cardioid mic. But omnidirectional then picks up all the way around the mic and all the way over the top. So it's meant to catch a field of area. So these are the kinds of mics that you would use to capture the room or capture a group of musicians. An omnidirectional mic will do a much better job. Now, many people in the past in your church probably bought some omnidirectional mics thinking they'd be great to catch the choir and put them into the sound system, so there's more volume. But omnidirectional mics in live sound introduce a potential for feedback, because they'll make the speakers ring because the pattern isn't tight enough to control that. So they're not as helpful for live, but for recording and for live streaming, omnidirectional mics are brilliant for catching an ensemble. I'm going to show you some examples in our own setup here. I'm coming from the church today, just so I can walk you around the space and show you some of how we're handling things here in the room. So that was polar patterns. Now we're going to talk about microphone structure quickly. Dynamic mics or condenser mics. There's really only the two kinds of microphones, dynamic or condenser. And the difference is, as it says on the screen, microphones either need power, which means they're a condenser mic, or they don't need any power themselves, and that's dynamic. Dynamics are the easiest mic to deal with, and the good news is that they're the most common mic in a church cupboard is a dynamic mic. So that's like this mic I held up before, handheld. Good. They're good for loud singers and other kinds of aggressive sources. So if you think of a loud brass instrument, or you think of on a percussion like a djembe, something that has a really loud kind of striking attack, those are what they're best for. Condenser mics require 48 volt, or sometimes it's called phantom power on your mixer. And what I know that seems like a weird thing, but it means that the microphone cable itself is delivering power. Just as the audio signal comes down from the microphone to the mixer, it is sending a low-level signal, power, electricity, back through the mic cable to power that microphone. So lots of the kind of, if you think pencil condensers, they're little skinny mics. I'll show you one in a little while here in the sanctuary. And you think many churches have those little hanging choir mics, the little tiny ones that come down in front of the choir loft. Those are almost always condenser mics. So they need that kind of external power. They tend to be more delicate, fragile physically. So you have to be more careful with them, which is why dynamics are so much more useful in a church environment where somebody might knock the stand over and so on. But what they offer you is a much wider frequency response and a wider dynamic range. So they will respond. Like a condenser mic with an omnidirectional pattern can pick up a choir very nicely for streaming, And I'll show you an example in a few moments. So I can't see hands going up or anything. So if anyone wants to jump in, just feel free to unmute and ask a question, make a comment, those kinds of things as we go. So I'm hoping once you do your microphone inventory that you have the microphones you need already in the building. Because we're talking about some of the microphones that you need are the ones you're already using on Sunday morning, your pulpit mic, whatever microphone your clergy person uses. Sometimes they wear a lav when they wander around the sanctuary, any kind of a handheld mic that you already have in use. So I'm hoping you have enough microphones on hand. But if you don't, then the good news is that you don't have to go super expensive on microphones for them to work well. The more you spend, the better it's going to sound. But we're talking the difference between 75, 80% good enough and 95, 100% good enough. It will certainly do the job. So there are lots of microphones available for $50 or so that will work just fine, up to that $250 kind of a range that I mentioned. And there are some other newer, cheaper brands available too, but I just recommend that people stick with some of those names that I put on screen, because any mic from those companies is a solid mic in terms of construction and value for dollar. And I included a link there as well to an article that will allow you. It goes by what I'm needing to do with the microphone, and then it makes suggestions for the kind of microphone you could use for that purpose. So that's there. I'm hoping you don't have to buy anything, because we're talking streaming on a budget after all. So here's where things get a little bit interesting too. You'll see my opening statement there about audio mixers, basic requirements. The good news is almost any mixer in a church building, regardless of its age, can be used to live stream, as long as it meets these certain requirements. I've encountered beautiful old mixers that are 40, 50, 60 years old that could still do this because they have what you need. So the first thing you need on your mixer, and the mixer is your, what the sound people sit at, right? It's got a bunch of knobs and you name it. That's your mixer. Oh, Cheryl's saying something here. I can't even see your chat that effectively, everyone, so. Blue Yeti. You are talking USB mics then, and USB mics would work fine for an audio only stream, but they won't work for an audio and video stream, because then your USB audio is delayed quite substantially. And so your video and your audio will end up significantly out of sync. So they're not as effective for this purpose. If you took a Blue Yeti mic and plugged it into a cell phone or a tablet that is capturing the video, then you might have better results. But plugging it into a computer, it won't work as well. Thank you for that. So you can keep telling me about the chats there, Cher, when they come in. Thank you. That'll help, because I've got a lot going on my screen here. So basically, here's the 3 things that you need to make this work. You need enough inputs or audio channels to meet your needs. So if you go to your church mixer and look at how many channels you have, and I'm going to show you a picture of a mixer in a moment and talk you through a little bit of that, but you need sufficient channels for your usual Sunday morning live sound needs. You know, pulpit mic, lav mic. In many churches, the thing that is not mic'd at all is the music, because you have an organ in the building that is sufficiently loud to deliver the sound. And you have a choir that sings unmiked in the space. The people sing unmiked. So the general tools that you have to get the spoken word out are already in place, but it's the music where you might be trying to hunt around for more microphones and more channels. So you do need additional empty channels for the specific streaming microphones and inputs. You know, mics to capture anything which doesn't already go through the live sound system. So you could do this you could do an effective live stream with one microphone, just one microphone capturing your music, if it is placed in the right position and it's the right kind of microphone. One of those omnidirectional condenser microphones can effectively capture a whole room. This is a totally out of context example, but Cheryl and I were in Delhi, India a number of years back, and we were blessed to be able to attend All India Radio, which is kind of their version of the CBC and the BBC, for a live recording session with a good friend of ours, a singer she's under contract to All India Radio. And we were in a recording studio that had one microphone hanging in the center of the room. And this is how they used to do things in studios back in the 1950s and 60s. All the musicians would gather around the microphone. You'd put the singer nice and close to the mic, and then you just stagger your instruments, depending on how loud they are, further away from the microphone. And so you're literally spatially creating the balance you need in the space, but one mic can do it. The more mics, the more flexible you are, but it can be that simple. So additional empty channels to meet your needs. This next point is really critical. Your mixer needs to have an auxiliary or monitor channel with a pre-post switch that you can set to pre. So what this allows is you can essentially send 2 different mixes from the mixer. You send one mix using the master faders, the main channel fader knobs control the volume going to your sanctuary sound. That's what everyone will be used to already. But the auxiliary channel with the pre-selected independently controls the volume going to your audio stream. So you're then sending your sound in 2 different directions, and you can have 2 completely different mixes going on. Like all of these mics that I'm talking about that you would use to capture your choir and so on, you don't want them coming through the sanctuary sound system. So they come into the mixer, your sanctuary, your main fader or knob for that channel is on 0, because you don't want it in the sanctuary sound system, but your auxiliary fader or knob for that channel is turned up to the volume level you need to send it out to Zoom. So I'm doing a lot of that here with capturing our instruments here in the building. I'll show you when we go on the tour. And finally, you need 48 volt phantom power if you're using condenser mics. And there will be a switch somewhere on your mixer that will tell you. And on more complex mixers, every single channel has a little phantom or 48 volt power button. Smaller mixers, it might be just one button for the entire board that turns it on and off for the entire board. Oh, just see another chat in here. Oh, Linda says we had this problem in our church. Auxiliary sound going through the mains. Too loud, too loud. Yes, indeed. So that's why you need that pre and post switch. Because if it's, that literally means that, you know, post means that the sound is coming out after the main fader. So the main fader also controls the auxiliary volume. So it's not independent. When you set it to pre, it means it sends the sound out to the auxiliary before the main fader. So it's independent of the main fader. And like I said before, you only need the 48 volt phantom power if you're using condenser mics. If you're doing it all with dynamic mics, then you don't need it at all. So lots of mixers of many ages and vintages can do this kind of thing depending on how they are configured. So that's the main thing we're looking for. So I'm hoping you can see my cursor on the screen here. This is just a very small, simple mixer, and I gave you a link at the bottom to understanding the basic layout of an audio mixer, an article you can follow up with. But this is a simple little mixer. It has 4 microphone inputs at the top, and we call these a channel strip. The vertical configuration there is a channel strip. So that's what controls the individual tone and volume, etc., for that mixer, for that channel. So this has 4 microphone channels and then some additional channels that are stereo pairs. You can see left and right. So you could plug a keyboard or something like that into one of those channels and run it as a mono rather than a stereo channel. That will work just fine. But every mixer is different. That's why it's hard for me to show you much on here. I'm going to show you on this same mixer. I just set up the stuff that makes this little mixer work. So you can see the aux volume for streaming. It's got an aux channel, aux 1 and 2 on this mixer. And over on the other side, there's the pre and post switch underneath the master volume for the aux stream. So that master is the one that controls the overall mix that you would send out to your stream. You know, blend individually how much you need from every source, using the channel volumes and then the master to control your overall volume going out to the stream, with your pre-switch engaged so that it's independent. This mixer, there's your channel volume to the sound system. Often these are big faders, you know, like just a vertical bar that you push up and down. In this little mixer, just because of the space, they've used knobs instead for each channel. And then on this mixer, there's just one phantom power switch on the back. So you just have to hunt around and find that. Sometimes it's called 48V, sometimes it's called phantom. It'll typically be called one or the other of those two things. Are there more chats? No. No? Okay. Thank you. So that's your basic mixer and what you would need for that. Now here's where it gets a little bit more technical. You need an audio interface. This is why you can use any mixer under the sun as long as it has an auxiliary send for you to use. You can use any mixer because you're just taking an audio patch cable out of that auxiliary output jack and you're sending it into an interface which converts the sound from the mixer into a digital signal on your computer. And here's why the USB mics don't work so well, the things like the Blue Yeti and those kinds of microphones, because they are not low latency. Professional audio is quite different from your standard consumer audio in Windows environment in particular. So an audio interface converts the sound to a very, like just milliseconds, you're talking of delay, milliseconds, so you won't really hear it. Signal on your computer. So you're sending in, and plus which they tend to be richer and warmer and so on. So they've got a better sound, wider kind of a sound, than the sound you get out of the little microphone on your laptop. If you're trying to stream from a laptop, the sound is thin and small. A microphone into an interface, and if you're listening to stereo speakers, it sounds like it fills the space. It's a very different experience. And the best, cheaper option, I've been recommending this interface for a number of years now, and everybody seems to have success with it, is the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. It just means 2 inputs, 2 outputs. There is a slightly cheaper version which does 1 channel only, but it's just a little bit cheaper. It might be $200 thereabouts. I would recommend getting the 2 channels so you have the option of going stereo on your streaming in the future. It just gives you more flexibility. So the interface then connects via USB to your computer because it's doing all the work of processing the sound, and then it sends the signal directly through. And the beauty of this particular interface is it connects easily to Windows and Mac and Linux computers. It just installs itself and you're up and running. So there are other interfaces you could use. There are a number. I know Debbie had one that, an ART, I think was the model of yours, wasn't it, Deb? That one you used to run. It's a very inexpensive interface and it worked well on your Mac system I think you're running over there. But the ARTs sometimes don't work on others. And it's just the way it goes. So there are options out there. So as I say, it receives the audio via cable connected to the aux output jack on your audio mixer.
And I just bought a PreSonus audio box USB 96.
Oh, I see that. PreSonus audio box USB 96 from Amazon. Well, given it has 96 in the name, that's a reference to the kilohertz. So it probably is a professional audio interface in terms of the signal it delivers. The question will just be how well it installs and runs. There are all kinds of interfaces out there you could buy, but just make sure it is. Yep, I got a comment from someone.
How are you?
Sorry, say that again. Say it again.
Are you?
Oh, I think. Okay, somebody needs to mute that mic, I think. Yes, and
I'm just watching Bruce Harding on a. Hold on.
Somebody can mute that. Thank you. Yeah, and Byron says that someone in our congregation had an old Steinberg that worked well. Yes, and the Steinberg ones, I don't see them as often anymore, but they're another company where their interfaces tend to play well with different computers. The issue with older interfaces is sometimes you can be hard to find a new driver that will work with the modern Windows 10, Windows 11 kind of operating systems and so on. So, but if you can find a driver, and as with anything, when you plug a peripheral device into a computer, install the drivers first. This is Windows in particular. Install the drivers first and then plug it in. And it should just find it and grab it. And if it doesn't grab it, then there's issues that you'll need to solve. But that's the quickest way to make that happen. So yes, there's all kinds of possibilities for interfaces. If you've plugged it in and it's working in your computer, then you're good to go. That's what I love to hear. So I'm glad that some people have already solved some of these issues. So that's the audio end of things in terms of what you're doing here. And then just one more piece of audio stuff. I know Debbie uses this software, and it's a good open source free program that lets you for doing your sound checks and so on. You can record with it. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Debbie, but those recordings that Debbie just did for Jane's songs were likely done in Audacity. You can even do some multi-track recording in Audacity. It's pretty crude. It's not designed for multi-track necessarily, but it's strong and powerful for grabbing a quick stereo feed. Audacity? Yeah, there you go. I'm a big fan of open source. I think open source is the way to go. And much of what I'm recommending here is open source product because it'll meet your needs, and you don't have to buy a $400 audio recording program when you've got something that'll meet your needs for free. So let's go see if I can click through the link here and have it come up on screen. Yes, you're seeing that, aren't you? I'm actually going to click over to Audacity too. So there's Audacity, how it looks in the wild. just a simple kind of I think it's a relatively simple layout. You can toggle. If things aren't working, you make sure you've got the right driver selected over here. You select your sound source because we are running that same Focusrite here at the church. I make sure I'm set up to that particular interface, and I tell that I'm recording a mono signal, and the speakers are going back out through that same Focusrite interface. And then up at the top, I'm able to toggle on and off.
I think you need to share that screen as opposed to the PowerPoint.
Oh, thank you. I thought it was coming through here. It looks like it's coming through on mine. Just a sec, I will share that screen. Often when I know this happened earlier to SAR2 as well, you can be in the middle of a share and you go to do something else and it's live on the share. So there we are there. Thank you for that. As I say, if I'm not making any sense, then jump in and tell me what you need. So there's what I was talking about with making sure you've got the right driver selected. For Windows, it'll be the newer standard is WASAPI. The older standard and still professional standard is ASIO. That's what I generally run, ASIO drivers. I've got the input selected here. Got mono selected because we're working in mono for our stream from the church here, and the speakers because I'm sending it right back out to the interface and then to our mixer. And then up at the top, what I do when I'm testing the mix, when I'm recording is up at the top, I click on the little button that makes the display go, so you can literally see how loud things are because you're getting the green and red bar that's showing you the volume levels right there on screen. So I'll grab a little sample recording, like we rehearse a hymn before the service. I'll grab a quick sample recording and then tell everyone to stop for a moment. I run to the booth. I take a quick listen to hear what it sounds like, make any adjustments, and then we're good to go. So, week by week, we get to the point where we hardly have to do that for our live stream, unless we're introducing something else that hasn't been part of what's going on. So, there you go. Yes, I see that. Thank you, Cheryl. Diana says, I hooked up mine this morning. It recorded beautifully into GarageBand. If it can record into GarageBand, it's going to be perfect for live streaming. Yep. Yeah, we use Audacity to record backtracks as well for some of our music in the church. Exactly. It's a flexible program. You can do many things with it. Like listen to what Debbie was able to do with those layered recordings. That's not all of them singing at the same time. That's more than one. That's a voice being recorded more than once to put those parts together and layering it over top of each other. So it's a good, simple solution to have on your church computer for free. Yes, there's Deb saying, yes, I do use Audacity. I thought so. We've been through this before together. Yeah, so I'll bring up my slideshow again. So for a video device, I stumbled across this particular converter on Amazon and am really impressed with how well it works. When I bought one of these, I now have two of them. When I bought one last summer, it cost about $50 on Amazon, and they're down to $19.99 now and still available. It's just, as it shows in the picture there, just a little thing. You can see you plug the HDMI from your camera source into that device, and then the output, you can see a USB jack or plug on the other side, and you plug that into your computer, and it converts that HDMI signal. I know people say, but my computer already has an HDMI jack on it. Why can't I use that? Well, because HDMI is designed to be one way only. So it's designed to send from your computer to a monitor, and it can carry audio as well. So that's why you can use it to drive a television or those kinds of things as well. But it doesn't transfer back the other way. So you can't plug a device, a camera, directly in and have it send that signal to your computer. You need something to convert the signal from the camera to something your computer can read. So that's what this little device does. Now, the speed and strength of your computer will affect how well these devices work. the stronger, more powerful your computer is, the more in sync your video and your audio will be. And that's what we're looking for. Something that's in sync. So basic computer requirements. This is where things get a little bit, techno again. But what I'm describing here is not a new machine necessarily. It's ideal, and even when I'm tossing out these kind of minimum requirements, if you have an old machine that is available and you're not sure if it works, set it up and see if it'll run it. It might run it and just be not quite as in sync, or it might stutter a little bit, but it could still do the job. So that's the most important thing. Use what you have and see if it could work. If you're looking to source something, I recommend at least 8 gigabytes of RAM and some kind of a quad core processor. So older generations of processors are dual core and even single core when you go way back. But the last 8, 9, 10 years, they're mostly quad core processors unless you've gone for something that's super cheap. You also ideally want something with a dedicated video processor because it will handle the encoding. That means that your main processor isn't trying to translate the video signal, to the video stream. The video processor itself will take that task, and it just makes it much cleaner. So as I said, the more powerful the machine, the better the results. So in our case here at the church, we did recycle an old gaming computer. Essentially, it's one of my old studio computers that I used on the boat for a number of years. It's about 8, 9 years old, but it was designed for gaming, and so in this case it has 16 gig of RAM, so more than I need it. Not that I used it for gaming. Cheryl's saying not that you used it for gaming, but yes. No, that's true. I did not use it for gaming, but it had the requirements that I needed for media production. It had 16 gigabytes of RAM, so more than I needed, and it has a 3 gig video processor in it, whereas I'm saying use 1 gig minimum, and that will do the job. And the other thing that is really critical is, if you can avoid it, never stream over Wi-Fi. Never stream over Wi-Fi. During Jane's workshop, you heard her cut out a little bit here and there, and the quality of the connection varying. If she had been plugged in to an Ethernet cable rather than on Wi-Fi, there would have been none of that. So if you use a computer that has a wired Ethernet jack and get it plugged directly into your router, then you will have a stable connection. Because Wi-Fi, even if it's nice, whiz-bang modern Wi-Fi, the speed goes up and down and up and down, depending on conditions. So you'll have a great signal, and then all of a sudden it'll start to stutter, and you name it. And it's important, computers are designed to always sniff for Wi-Fi, to look for Wi-Fi signals. So it will always favor Wi-Fi if Wi-Fi is turned on. So if you want to get your wired connection working well, turn the Wi-Fi off. Plug it in, get it up and running, then just literally shut the Wi-Fi off, and you'll get a much more stable connection. I think we might have another chat here. Yes, you can get an Ethernet to USB or USB adapter. That's right. There are little dongles as well that will do that job for you if you're more modern computer, because many modern computers don't have Ethernet jacks anymore. So thank you for that, Lynn. That's a great idea. Yeah, and Byron says, do you know how long a wired connection can be? Do you mean the cable length, Byron? The length of cable? Because if that's your question, Ethernet cables can run hundreds of feet, and the signal might degrade slightly over the long term, but not much at all. In our case here at the church, the router is in the church office, and it comes up and through the ceiling joists and drops down into the tech booth, and then we have a little hub. So the one Ethernet cable goes into a hub, which splits it multiple ways, so we can plug in a number of different devices. So that's probably a 100-foot run, 150-foot run between us and the office. And that is enough it does the job quite well for us here. And we don't have a real whiz-bang connection here at the church either. I think they're paying for an 80 meg service, whereas, you know, you can get in the city, you can get 300 and 500 meg services and so on, really fast service. But
Byron says my new job.
yeah, my new job for next week. Excellent, Byron. That's the way. It'll change your life for your streaming if you get it off of Wi-Fi, for sure. It'll be much more stable. Okay, I think before we go on to this next slide, I'm going to take you for a tour, and we're going to go back to talking about audio and so on. So I'm going to switch my camera to the sanctuary camera, because you get a little bit of a tour of our building now at this point. So I'm going to disappear on the screen here, and Cheryl's going to slide over and bring me up on the sanctuary camera. I'm going to go wander a bit, and we'll talk about setup here in the building. Taking my microphone with me, so I'm hoping I'm still on for everyone. Can you give us the wide shot for the sanctuary, Cher? So this is a bit of a strange camera we have here at the church. It's actually a security camera, and it's at the back of the sanctuary. Yes, I'm on. It's actually a security camera at the back of the sanctuary. Which means that it kind of looks like a drugstore, department store kind of footage. But what it does give us is these cameras work really well in low light conditions, and you can zoom and so on. I'm going to stand at my usual spot for Sunday morning here, and Cheryl will just switch it over. Well, yeah, give us the one for Bruce alone, Cher. That's a setting we use to catch the whole band when we want to put the band up on. Yeah, there we go. And if I look up at the camera, so then I can do song leadership on a Sunday morning for the camera. It's a solution we're using here. I don't think it's very pretty, but it's relatively effective. And this is going through that same little video dongle that I'm talking about, that video encoder for $19.99 on Amazon and into the computer. So we had it there already installed, because in our space, you can go back to the widescreen share. In our space, the chancel platform never came in. It was designed to have a portable platform in the chancel area here, which, due to budget concerns, never got created. So the first thing everybody did was say, we can't see the kids during children time on the carpet. And I said, well, you never gave us a platform that's raised. How can you do that? So one of our techies came up with the solution and fundraised a little bit and put that camera in, just so we could put the carpet up on the screen for children's time. But now it becomes our streaming mechanism, so it works well for that. So I thought I'd just show you some of what I have here. I'm just going to drop my belt pack into my pocket so I don't have to hold on to it. And I'm bringing up. Now, if somebody could spotlight the one that says Crossroads or Bruce Cell video, if somebody could spotlight that instead.
Yeah.
It's like on the third screen or something. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hold
There
on.
we are.
I've done it.
You got
there.
it.
Okay.
So I did this so I could wander around the sanctuary and show you some of what I'm doing here. So on my own setup, I have a classic Shure microphone. So this is cardioid, and it's a dynamic mic that I'm using for my voice because, you know, nice close miking, so it comes through nice and clear. You know, I play djembe, so I have djembe going in the building as well. I have a dynamic cardioid mic that I'm using for the top head of the djembe. Now, I was doing an event, a song event down in Texas a few years back, and we had the sound person from the Dixie Chicks who was setting up the sound for us, and he taught me the technique for miking underneath the djembe as well. So I'm using a large diaphragm. This is actually a kick drum mic, but it's still a dynamic cardioid pattern, but it's got a big diaphragm, so it's meant for capturing big bassy sounds. So the two mics together create the djembe feed. You just mix them together. And this is one of the things that I do not put through the main faders. So the main fader on the board on these channels is off, and this just goes directly out to Zoom because I get plenty of djembe in the space. I don't need to hear it on a Sunday morning. It's good acoustically. But this way the djembe gets captured and sounds like a djembe. I'll just put this down. I know I'm probably making you all a little bit ill with motion sickness. I'll put that down for a moment and just give you a little taste of the sound. So it ends up sounding like a djembe. We had, I'm just going to show you another couple of microphones here. This is the band area. We have different instrumentalists who sit behind plexiglass barriers, of course. But you'll see I'm using those all India radio techniques. I have a single pencil condenser up here on a stand, single pencil condenser that is capturing all of my instrumentalists. And I have, there's a violinist who sits closest to the mic. Then I have some saxophones. And at the far back over by Cheryl, you could wave to everyone, Cheryl. In front of the sound booth, we have a trumpet. And at that distance, it sounds fantastic over the stream. So one omnidirectional little pencil condenser is capturing all of that very effectively. And you can just move the chairs. I have our trumpet player doubles on flute. And so he will come forward from that far chair and sit closer when he's playing flute sometimes when it's not too busy. People were asking about miking, effective miking for a piano, and I'm going to take some questions on that later on in terms of how you currently have it configured. I have a really simple configuration at this point. It's just, once again, one of these, a decent quality, but still fairly cheap. It's only about $150. Microphone, dynamic, and it's a cardioid pattern microphone just on a stand hanging down inside the top of the piano, and I place it right over where the strings match, where they cross each other, so you get kind of maximum coverage. It's not the most ideal mic for this purpose. I would rather put something with a wider pattern, and once again, not an omnidirectional, but a condenser mic would give us a richer and wider frequency range, but it's surprising how effective it is in terms of just capturing piano. So it's a nice, simple solution to do that. And then we have an organ that is just plugged in direct, a Nord organ, and a microphone for our pianist who adds some vocals as well. Because during the pandemic, we would never have mic'd our singers and stuff, but our pianist is a strong singer, so she'll be on a mic, and I'm on a mic over at my djembe station, and our minister Carrie is a strong singer with a Bachelor in Music degree and so on. So she's usually between us. So I'm using more mic'd singers than I would normally use. But in Nick's case, I don't send much of the piano vocal mic out to the Sanctuary sound system. It's mostly going to Zoom, so that people have more than just my voice coming through on Zoom. So that's kind of the essence of it. Maybe we could take this off spotlight again. And I'll take it back. I'm coming into the booth again right now. And I'm just going to switch back to my laptop feed. There we are. Oh, I see it's there. Thank you. It's unspotlighted, and I'm back to being in the booth. So that's the essence of how I've got things configured. It's relatively simple. Now, one of the issues that will come up, and I'm sure we can talk about this together, but one of the issues that will come up is when you use things like condenser mics and omnidirectional mics and so on, then your room becomes the issue. And here's one of the questions. Somebody's asking about feedback issues. There are no feedback issues if a microphone is not going to the sound system. If it's just going to your stream, no feedback at all. That's why this works. You only get feedback issues if, like Jason's laptop this morning, we got a little bit of feedback when he was using it to live stream because the speakers were also turned on. And so the speakers were too close to the microphone and you get feedback. Because when you're sending a microphone just to live stream, there are no speakers involved. So that's the key to making these more sensitive microphones serve your purpose and give you an effective live stream. So, and that's the thing. People have probably bought mics in your congregation that didn't really meet the needs. They bought an Omni mic and thought, gee, this will be great for picking up the choir. But it just, you turn it up a little bit in the sound system and immediate feedback. So it just gets put in the cupboard and left for all time. But it doesn't have to be. This is another use for those, like those little pencil condensers I have in use. I should have said too, I have 2 of those little condensers there. One of them is facing out at the congregation, and that captures the singing in the room. So we actually, it sounds like Sunday morning worship. It doesn't sound like a pop band making music for everyone. You hear the room. That's one of our problems here at Crossroads, is we have an incredibly live acoustic in here. It's too live. We're more like a cathedral. We did some damping on the walls and stuff to help bring it under control, but we're still running 2 or 3 seconds of reverb here in the room. So you have to be, the drier your room is, the better it will work. I see another text here. I'm just going to have a quick look at best output, including type of cord for keyboard to mixer, mono or stereo, 1 or 2 outputs, and how to avoid pedal noise. Thanks for the question, Faye. So are you talking about an actual acoustic piano? That's the question I have for you first.
No, it's a Yamaha keyboard.
It's a Yamaha keyboard, so it's digital keyboard. And you're saying you get pedal noise through the feed on a digital keyboard?
I just have tried doing some recordings from a direct input into the audio interface and into my computer. I haven't tried enough things yet, but I just want some advice here. I could hear pedal noise on my recording.
Interesting. That'll be an issue with the keyboard itself. Like lots of keyboards, you don't hear any pedal noise at all if they're a digital keyboard. They're not designed that way. And some of them are trying to make it sound more like an acoustic piano. And so they digitally add pedal noise in as well, just to make it sound, they think, more natural. With acoustic pianos, a simple microphone. Some people use contact mics, so something that actually sticks to the instrument, and that will give you a lot more of the pedal noise because you're getting the vibrations directly off the pedaling and so on. So with an acoustic piano, just try not to mic anywhere as close to the pedals. Like if you're using an old grand piano or something where you can raise the lid a little bit on its stick and put the microphone inside, over that same spot where the strings cross, so that you get the widest frequency as close as possible. That will work best. And you're talking digital. So 1/4-inch cables is what you generally need. There's some more detail from you. Thank you. My keyboard is wired to the sound. From Lori, she says her keyboard is wired to the sound via a Zoom U22 audio interface. Yeah, no, that one might be or might not be USB. I do not know.
I
It's
have
USB.
a USB cable adaptable.
Yeah.
And the friend plugs into the keyboard.
Okay. Yeah, the question is whether it's USB, like professional level, those low latency drivers or not. I'm not sure about that interface or not. Did you notice it being out of sync with other things in your recording and so on?
I haven't noticed that, no.
Okay, then it's probably low latency, because if you're not hearing, you really hear it, because Windows audio without the low latency drivers is a second or even 1.2 seconds out of sync. It can be that drastic. Yeah, Debbie says, make sure you aren't using the laptop internal mic by accident. Yes, so we have a question about keyboards. 1/4-inch cable, the same kind of cable that you would use for a guitar. I'm just going to grab a 1/4-inch cable here. this kind of a cable end is what we're talking about, a cable like that to plug.
That's a mono cable then.
That's a mono cable, yeah. Yeah, you can only really run stereo if you have 2 channels available on your board. So then you can take 2 of these cables and plug it into 2 separate channels or into a stereo channel on your mixer if your board will handle stereo. And then it really depends on whether your live stream is in stereo or in mono. If your live stream is mono, then it won't matter. You could just plug out of the one side of your keyboard and send mono. If it's stereo, yes, then I would, and you have enough channels on the mixer, I would run it in stereo, and that'll just give you that wider field overall on screen. Yeah, so 1/4-inch cables are the kind of thing we use for guitars and keyboards and all of that. Yeah, and then coming back to miking pianos, it's not an exact science with pianos. If you're in a professional studio, they'll have a stereo pair of condenser mics that they hang, on a single stand, often just down over that same spot inside the piano that I'm talking about, on a grand piano with the lid up, and right over top of that sweet spot where the 2 sets of strings meet to give you that nice balanced sound. So, any other direct questions regarding getting certain instruments into your mix? Anything at all? I know keyboards are a big one, right? Keyboards. Those, as I was saying earlier, those old choir mics that you might have in your choir loft that were put up years ago and it never really worked, use them for this. They will be perfect for capturing your choir. They really will. What about a drum kit? There's a good question. Yes, we have a drum kit here in the sanctuary. Our drummer just went off to music school and hasn't been around as much these days, so our kit isn't getting used, so I don't have it set up for live streaming. The ideal basic configuration for live streaming, I've had our drummer here occasionally, and she's actually getting picked up relatively well just by that one single pencil condenser. It's enough to catch her and bring her into the mix. But if you want clarity, and this is what close mics give you, clarity in the mix, then a kick drum mic, so one mic inside the kick drum, which will anchor and give that, the thump, it'll come through really well. You don't have to turn it up in the mix. You can still have the room mics capture the overall sound, but one mic, and that should probably be a dynamic cardioid pattern microphone. It could be just about anything and it'll do the job. If the fatter one, like I have underneath my djembe, will give you a much richer kick drum sound. But that into the drums. And if you're still not hearing things very, very clearly, you could add a couple of condenser mics hanging on stands, kind of on either side of the kit, and that will catch the rest of the kit. We often mic with just 3 mics, kick drum, and 2 mics for a stereo pattern up top. The other ideal, if you have 4 channels, you do kick drum, you have another dynamic cardioid pattern mic on the snare drum, and then 2 overhead mics on either side to catch the cymbals and the toms and all of those. So 4 channels will do you well for drums. But as I'm saying, even one single, for our purposes for streaming, one single microphone, of a wide enough field over top of the drum kit will catch the drum kit quite well for streaming. So that should do it well. Now, Faye's asking about a cajon. Now, that's another interesting animal. If you don't know what cajons are, they're a box drum that has a very thin front. So you generally sit on, it looks like a big box. You sit on the drum and play it off the front. So it's a thinner plywood face on it. So most of the sound is coming out of the front of the cajon. So same thing, I would probably take a dynamic cardioid mic or a condenser cardioid if you have one and it can handle the sound pressure coming off the drum, and just get it in as close as you can to the front of the cajon where it's not interfering with them playing and so on. That one single mic in front of the cajon, as close as you can make it, within a couple feet preferably, or even closer if you can get it in there. And that should pick up the cajon quite well. And then, like I say, if you using your Audacity or something else, an audio recorder, you get everything plugged in and set up and try a sample song and adjust the mix. When I'm doing drums on their own, I'll get the drummer to play all on their own, and then you can adjust just the drums within themselves, right? Making sure there's enough kick drum, enough of the overheads, those kinds of things, and then bring everybody else in. The whole issue of mixing is another entire animal, which is probably a bit beyond us today, but because then you're into tone control and so on. So your different mixers have different levels of ability to equalize, EQ the sound. You know, most have at least 2 knobs per channel, bass and treble, if you want. And some have 3 knobs, so bass, treble, and mid-range frequencies. You know, some have a parametric EQ, they call it.
I like how you got this all in one. Was that on purpose?
No, not even on.
You're live. Yeah, so if it has a parametric equalizer in the middle on the channel strip, what that is, it allows you to set the frequency level that you want that volume knob associated with to use. Some have great presets to use for EQ. Somebody's asking again. Yeah,
Oh,
I see.
sorry.
That's okay, ask away.
Do you have some chart that can tell me what frequency different things are most common in? We had on Good Friday, the Baptists rent our sanctuary and all of the Baptist churches get together. And I had a little bit of a lesson, and he's rhyming off all these numbers and expecting me to remember them all. But like voices are, pull it up in this section, and piano, pull it up in this section. Like, is there a chart to follow?
I would Google it.
Okay.
Yeah, just Google frequency ranges, instruments, voices, like those kind of keywords, and you should be able to catch it. Okay. Like basically, a male voice sits around 250 hertz, somewhere in that ballpark, down 150 to 300. Female voices are a little bit higher than that. Like, the core kind of frequency ranges we're dealing with are roughly 100 hertz on the low end. Like 110 is a low A, below 2 levels below that middle A is 110 in terms of frequency. And up to around 8,000 hertz on the very top end, 10,000 hertz for the extreme high sibilance. So if you're hearing kind of woofiness and muddiness in a mix, it's generally in the kind of 300 to 500 hertz range, 250 maybe. So if you can tone that down a little bit, it'll help to clean up the sound in that area. And if you're hearing a lot of extra kind of bass explosion and so on, many mixers also have a little button, high pass filter, HPF they call it, which just rolls the low frequencies off. And in general, if you want a cleaner mix, you could roll those low frequencies off of everything except the instruments that are really meant to produce bass, like a kick drum, like a bass guitar, like those kinds of things. If you put the high pass filter on those, it really will not work very well. So you keep it off on those. Linda had a question about, can you explain what cardioid means in relation to mic? Well, we come back to my slides. I'll pull that slide up again so people can see that. That is just literally a structure issue of the mic. Polar patterns is what we're talking about. I'm just coming back through here. There we are, microphone polar patterns. And there are many more than what I put on the screen here, but the 2 most common are cardioid. Cardioid is the one that's designed to be used directly in front of the microphone. So if you have 3 people gathered around a cardioid microphone, you could put your harmony singers on 2 sides of a cardioid microphone and your melody singer up the middle, and you'll get twice the volume from the melody and less from the sides, because it's not designed to pick up the sides. It might still do it, so you can experiment, but that's the thing. Cardioid is the pattern that keeps it tight. Then they have designations like supercardioid and hypercardioid, where they get really, really narrow in terms of their pattern. And then some are labeled cardioid, but they're actually quite wide. Our pulpit mic here is called a cardioid condenser mic, but it's really wide, and we get a lot of feedback off of it, unless I do other kinds of things with it to keep it from ringing out in the room. So cardioid, and then omnidirectional is the other end of the spectrum, the one that picks up everything. So that's the one to use to catch the room, to catch an entire ensemble, those kinds of things. Yes, that's right, bidirectional figure eight. There are a lot of different patterns, but the bidirectional figure eight is not as common unless you go buy one specifically. So a figure eight pattern is the kind where you can put people on both sides of the microphone, and it picks up equally well behind the microphone and in front of the microphone. So the figure eight is the field around the microphone itself. It's designed to reject on the sides. I've seen people do this in studios where you can record. If you're working with a few singers and you don't have enough headphones so everybody can hear, you could put figure eight pattern on the microphone, put your singers on either side of the microphone, front and back, and you can put a little speaker at the side and put a little bit of the music coming through, and the microphone will barely pick it up or not pick it up at all because it's designed to reject sound from the side of the microphone. So they're very useful, but they wouldn't be as useful in our context for church work. And as I say, those two standard kinds of patterns are the most common. So if you can't tell what kind of a microphone you have, hopefully you can figure out what the make and model are, and you can look them up online. Look them up online. What about a mic for handbells? That's another good question. Cheryl says, do they need a mic? Well, the same principles apply. You're probably talking about a bunch of people standing at a table, a long table with handbells. So once again, if you could do a couple of omnidirectional microphones, well, for recording or for streaming, Diana's saying for recording, the same principle for streaming or recording. You put your two microphones, one, they space them out a bit, like one single omnidirectional mic in the middle will catch everything well. But if you have two, you'll get better coverage by spacing them out down the table. And that will pick it up quite well. As I was saying earlier, your room will determine how effective all of this is. Omni mics in a big swimmy room mean in our live stream, we still get a lot of room sound. So, I'm used to, as a sound guy, to always putting a little bit of reverb on the guitar, for example, just to warm up the sound. And even sometimes on my voice for singing, I like that little bit of reverb. But it just makes it muddy as heck in here because every mic is picking up reverb from the room. So I run everything dry as can be and just let the room be our natural reverb for the space. So handbells, same as miking a choir or an ensemble and so on, just same basic kinds of principles. So any other questions? I think we're coming close to the end of our time, aren't we? Yes, we are. I'm going to make sure I haven't left anything off on my slides, that we made it through everything here. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. More than one camera, Byron's asking about. Yes, this is, I should get ahead here a little bit. We got into, because we're all into audio and so on, that's where I was focusing my time here. But we'll spend the rest of our time mostly talking about multiple cameras and so on. This is where it gets interesting. Like, there are simple ways to be able to stream. You could, for example, if you had a Zoom account, you could have 4 iPads or tablets or phones around the sanctuary. One focused mostly on the pulpit, one focused on the musicians, and just literally have somebody switching the spotlight like we did earlier there. Switch the spotlight on Zoom between the different cameras and you're done. If you have multiple cameras and you want to put them into your computer, each one would need its own video encoder so that it can convert from the camera signal into the computer. And then you need some way of mixing. And this is why I'm into encoding software here. So OBS is what I recommend. OBS, Open Broadcast System. This was designed for broadcast. It's supported around the world. There's a huge community online using this software. It works incredibly well. It's a bit complex, but it allows you to control many different sources. It allows you to do things like in my camera feed where you see the Then Let Us Sing logo and stuff. You can put logos up. You can put your projections up through OBS. You can make nice transitions, so it fades from one to the other and so on, and combining your camera sources. But it is more complex. A simpler way of doing it, but once again, one that costs a bit. Cheryl and I did a service for Norval United in the greater Toronto area, just out of Brampton. And they were using StreamYard, which is on the screen there as well. And it's an online encoding platform, which means that nobody has to have it installed on their machine. You can do it using a standard computer. And it's quite slick, quite slick. I'm just going to bring up an example here. Can you see that now? Nope,
No.
Thank you. That's what I need to hear. Okay, then I will just stop the share and bring up that particular slide. Here we go. So this is, they've just got a little video that runs here showing their platform. So you can select different logos and bring them up on screen. You can bring in your social media comments and so on. There's social media being fed in from your YouTube and Facebook streams and so on. And you can put them up on screen as you go. You know, for people who are, if you're doing prayers of the people via social media, you can put it up on the screen and all pray together. There's lots of flexibility, but once again, it's a pay system. And then you can stream from there to various platforms. The thing I would recommend actually, I know it's a little bit clunky and so on, but the thing I would recommend is using Zoom, because it will do all of this for you, and it gives you that flexibility I was talking about people joining in from at home or from in the building. They can be part of leadership in the service, and you can send your stream to YouTube and Facebook Live and all the other streaming platforms. If you want that kind of streaming, you can send it, have Zoom do it automatically. If you have the professional level account, which is $20 a month, that's the first pay level, which you have to have anyway, so it doesn't shut off after 40 minutes. Some of you may have family gatherings on free Zoom accounts, and you have a 40-minute limit, and so on. So by the time you pay that first level, you automatically have the ability to stream. So you can have all your leadership gather on Zoom, or if you want, or your whole community gather on Zoom, and then the streaming just happens automatically. You're sending to your Facebook Live and your YouTube streams right out of Zoom. If you don't use Zoom as your main platform for this, then you will need the encoding software. So you need something like OBS or StreamYard, another streaming online platform like that, to be able to manage your stream. I'll just quickly here, I'm going to pull up my OBS screen. I'm running OBS in the background on this computer as well. So here's how OBS looks. That's not there yet, is it? Nope. No. Just give me a moment. I need to share it. Here we are. So here's how OBS looks in the back end of it. So down the side here, you have scenes. So this is where I can set, so I have a sanctuary scene, which just automatically toggles to my sanctuary camera, or I can toggle back to the laptop cam. Then you can do things like, this is really raw, but camera plus PowerPoint, this is just a preset that I set up that gives me there's the PowerPoint and my face on screen at the same time. You could feed a social media feed in, from a browser, because you can also, using the window capture down here, you can tell it to capture anything like your browser or any program you have and throw it up on screen as well. So you could have a little bar. You could set these all up as the scene templates down on the side there, and then just bring them up when you need them during the service. So it's very flexible. As you can see, it can handle multiple cameras. So I'm just using our sanctuary camera or the laptop camera just to bring them up or down. And then you can do things like just toggling on and off your graphics, whatever graphics you have on screen. So you could have your congregational logo. You can just keep it down in the corner of your stream all the time using OBS. It's incredibly powerful. There is a huge community online supporting it. So lots of forums. You can jump and ask questions. Beautiful YouTube videos that'll show you how to do this aspect and that aspect. Because it might be a little finicky for you, but there's lots of help out there to support you in it. And it's, once again, like Audacity, it's free and available for anyone. So I think we're almost out of time. Thank you very much to everyone. A few more questions here. How many tech people do you have running things? Yes, that is an issue, isn't it? Oh boy. In terms of getting our stream up and running, it is Cheryl and me in the booth. And because I've got the audio all set up ahead of the service, it just sits and runs itself. And we'll tweak the sanctuary sound. Pulpit mic's a bit too loud, those kinds of things. We tweak that as we're going. But the Zoom audio is set and ready to roll. Cheryl is not a techie at all, but she's learned how to operate our particular camera. So her basic role is just toggling on and off the audio and video from Zoom as she goes. That's most of it. And running videos when we need to have videos, sharing videos on screen, those kinds of things. But you do need to have somebody who is tech savvy enough to take what we're learning here and make it happen in the space. It's true. We have gone from, we used to have 2 techies on a Sunday morning. We would have our person who was mostly handling audio, and then somebody else who was handling projection, PowerPoint, running PowerPoint to our screens. Now we have somebody on Zoom who's running the PowerPoint through screen share. We have a host who's hosting Zoom, just making sure mics stay muted and all of that. And then we have Cheryl in the booth and me. So there's 4 of us technically involved. And a question about, can I send a specific question later in the mail? You betcha you can. Send me any question you want. I'm happy to respond, because I'm passionate about this stuff. This is a pandemic project for me, getting us up and running in this kind of a way. As Tanya says, our minister does a lot of it, but not great having it all fall on him. That's why if you can support these people, you as a musician know what you want to get in terms of your audio needs. So you can survey what's available for your microphones and how many channels you have available, and do your best. If you can get 1 or 2 Omni mics going to capture everything, get them through the mixer, get them just out to the auxiliary stream going out, then you've done some of that. But at the very least, even if you've got somebody who's relatively tech savvy, but they don't know what you need, you can say, here, do this, do this, do this, and you'll have it all up and running. Okay, I'm going to pop out of remove the spotlight, because I see some people I'm going into gallery view too, so I can see you. I see there's some hands up. Lynn has had a hand up for a while. Okay.
Sorry, I realized I forgot to put my hand down.
That's good. Okay.
Given my age, I'm not sure if I know my question anymore.
That's fine, Lynn.
What we're using, I do know, I have one question. We have a wireless Sennheiser omnidirectional mic that we have set up near our old teeny tiny pipe organ,
Yep.
and the grand piano. And
Yep.
if the singer who is leading the hymns, because we don't really get congregational sound otherwise, the singer stands about 2 feet back, the balance is set up just fine to go out on Zoom. We have a cardioid mic, is that right?
Yep.
Wired, that faces the choir, which I'm taking to mean probably isn't doing much of anything. If I'm right.
It'll catch the people directly in front of it, and if it's a distance from them, it'll be relatively thin too, so it's not really doing justice.
Well, we have an incredibly live room, so it doesn't seem to matter. The sound balance going out, people are saying they're hearing it beautifully like that, except when it comes to words. Like they can't hear the words. Well, we're all masked. What am I saying?
Yep.
So you can't
That's
hear
where,
the words.
if you had 2 or 3 of those cardioid mics in front, just down the choir, that would give you a bit more clarity. That would help.
Our bigger question is that we have a Samsung Smart TV.
Yep.
One for the choir to see and one for the congregation. Big, nice, beautiful sound. When we go to play the Zoom speakers over that, we get all kinds of feedback, even though our Yamaha Stage Pass 600i Stage Pass system is directly into our mixer, and that goes directly in for the Zoom. We're getting feedback, and we're not sure how that's happening. Like, I had it one day where I had no feedback from any microphone, and it was just me, and then someone hit a button, or change something. I have no idea because I'm really not the audiophile, but I'm
Yep.
trying to learn.
You know, what might be happening is your pulpit mic or another more sensitive microphone is live at the same time. And so sound from a speaker is being picked up by that microphone, and that's what creates feedback. It's a loop.
Right. So if we shut off the internal sound to play the Zoom speaker,
yeah,
and then we
have our Zoom feed comes back in from the cloud back into our mixer. So I have to make sure it's on that channel. It comes in on its own channel. I have to make sure that the volume's off on aux, so it doesn't then play back through Zoom and you get this incredible loop going.
Right.
But then it comes out just to the sanctuary system, and as long our pulpit mic gives us trouble, so as long as it's muted, we're okay. And
well, I was having for some reason. I'm almost wondering now if it isn't the laptop internal miking that's the problem. Like it's on this, and
yeah, you might, if there was a microphone in the laptop, just turn that microphone off.
Yeah. Okay.
That'll eliminate the problem. Should eliminate the problem.
I know
there's mysteries with all of this.
Oh my gosh! I wish there was like Joe Person or Jill Person or person of any name who could possibly just come to the church, walk us through our system, and say, "This is what you're doing. Like here's the right things. Yeah. Here are the things you can fix." Because we got a grant from United Possibilities here in Ontario. We're in Western Ontario Waterways. We got a grant for $5,000 to get all the hardware and the computer, which is almost not a gaming computer, but very close. So it's got really good resolutions. And then there's more grant money to buy additional equipment to make it work. So we have a lovely camera that has 3 settings. You have to be able to tell it to go to the settings, and you can't tell it from the computer. It's a remote.
Yep.
Which, when there's only one operator and there's 4 things you're trying to do, that does take time. And that's the mix of hybrid and worship.
Yes.
You've got to have that patience in the room as if you were on Zoom, right?
Yeah, it is simpler if you're just streaming. It's much simpler than trying to do live, and because you get those issues feedback because something's coming through the system that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
Thank you, Bruce.
Well,
I'll send you more questions, don't you worry.
Sure, sounds good. And Nancy's got her hand up quickly. I know we're over time a little bit, but
our problem is getting sound, the bass sounds. We often, I play pipe organ, and I often have a tuba as well. And we have a special microphone, and for a while it wasn't too bad on Zoom, but in recent weeks, the Zoom cuts off both the highs and the lows of everything, no matter what my technician does. And he's pretty good at what he does. So we have stopped using Zoom and gone for Facebook Live, because it doesn't happen when we do that.
Well, Zoom is designed for spoken word, so they have a lot of compression algorithms that take all those frequencies out. Are you using the original sound settings? Debbie mentioned it this morning to Jason. And then all you can really do is you go into your advanced settings in audio in Zoom on the audio tab by your microphone there, and just set all of their compression options to as minimal as possible.
Yeah, they've done that.
They've done that.
Yeah.
Well, then I know I don't get all the bass I want out of Zoom either, but it's going fairly well. I get most of what I want. And as a media platform in general for a service, it works really well. So yes, that's the point too. If using streaming directly, it's more passive to stream out to YouTube and Facebook, because people can't really interact as much as they can on Zoom. But you don't get the compression issues being applied to the signal. They just literally take what you're sending them and stream them out. So it is cleaner going directly out to YouTube and Facebook. But then you could use Zoom and then stream it, right? You could stream through Zoom as well. But we're talking about imperfect solutions, right? Trying to do the best we can with limited dollars and people who don't know what they're doing and so on. So if you can get you know, a single iPad, or do like Jason did this morning and just stick a computer up there and get your piano and your voice out, and it happens, then hallelujah. Hallelujah. You've done your job as best you can.
I
And
just tell everybody, just come to church.
just come to church.
They can now.
Thank you. I think Karen's trying to tell us it's time's up.
Thank you.
Yes, our time is up, but that was just an amazingly wonderful discussion, Bruce. And thank you, Cheryl, for your help too. Lovely to see your voice. Oh my goodness. To see your lovely face is what I was trying to say. But thank you both so much. It was we could go on and on, I'm sure.
Yes, we could. We could. Yes, thank you, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there with all of this. And in many cases, thank you for being the person who cares in your congregation about making sure it doesn't sound like a tin can out there on your stream. You know, we're the ones that have to take that on and help our techies with mic placement and all of that. So even if that's your only role, then take it on. Experiment. Beautiful. Thank you. And I think we're into a social time right now anyway, aren't we?
We are into a social time. So.
Yeah, so I can stick around for a little bit. Cheryl and I will we're going to head back to the boat for the hymn sing tonight. So we'll duck out in a little while, but I can stick around if people want to talk a little bit further about some of these weirdnesses they're experiencing while trying to do this work.